Hello, new elementary general music teacher. Welcome to our series on helping you go from surviving the music room to thriving as a music teacher. In today's video, we're going to talk about managing your classroom. That's right, managing your classroom. Stick around. If you are new to music, you need to first manage behavior. That's right, manage behavior. And I do mean that because you have to manage behavior before you ever teach them one thing about music. Because if their behavior is not under control, then nobody's learning anything. The question is, how do you do that? The first thing that I do is I set expectations. Setting expectations is really, really important to letting kids know what is okay and what is not okay in your classroom. When I taught middle school, it was the same thing. I was in a very, very violent school, the most violent school in my school district. And in the rest of the building, it was crazy town. But I set the expectation in my classroom that this was my private lovely place, and this is how we behave in this space. And I just kept saying it over and over and over again until the kids got the idea. Same thing in elementary school. This can be their safe space, regardless of what else is going on in your school, regardless of the crazy town things that are going on, regardless of what kind of a school you have, whether it is an inner city school, a low income school, a high income school, a private school, any kind of school, you have to say this is what's okay and this is what's not okay. The easiest way to set expectations in that regard is to have some very simple rules. I just have three. I have three rules in my classroom. Be safe, be kind, be respectful. Everybody in the whole, anybody, regardless of their level of understanding, can understand that. Be safe, be kind, be respectful. Now, at the beginning of the school year, we talk about what that means. If I'm safe, that means I'm physically safe. So we don't run around. We don't crash into people when we're doing movement. We keep the instruments safe because I have my xylophones and whatnot set out in my room. Not everybody has a room that they can do that, but mine are actually set out so we don't go over there when we do movement. We use the instruments safely so that they don't get broken. We never hit another person ever with anything ever. We are safe with our words. We're safe with our bodies, right? And then that goes right into rule number 2. I'm kind. So if I'm being kind and I hear somebody making fun of somebody else, even if they're on a screen that we're watching, sometimes we watch videos of performers and so forth, and they make comments about those performers, and I'm like, we don't do that. That's not nice. That's not kind. What's our second rule? Our second rule is be kind. We don't do that. We're kind here. This is what we are. We're kind people. And you just hold that line. You hold that line and you remind them, is that a kind thing that you just did? What's our second rule? Be kind. So let's make a new choice about that. You don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to shame them. That's not good. Just remind them. What's the expectation? That's what we're doing. And anytime that that's not happening, you talk about it. You take time in that moment, not for no, you don't give them like a 20-minute lecture. You don't have them put their heads down and turn the lights off. And that's draconian. Don't do that. Just stop for a minute without judgment. Look at that child and say, what's our second rule? Be kind. Is what you said just now, is that kind? Almost always they know. They know. They know. So just hold them to it. The third rule is be respectful, and that's when we talk about being respectful to other people, giving people a chance to share their ideas, giving people a chance to have their input. If you're in a group situation, maybe that means that you are being respectful to the instruments and being safe and kind and respectful to the instruments. You're using it the way that you're supposed to be using it. You're doing your best. Right? Yet all three of those rules, they cover a lot of different things. And as you bring out new procedures like going to the xylophones or getting a book out or putting pencils away or whatever it is, you can go back to those three rules and say, what is my expectation? There you go. If you get to the point where you're doing center activities, same thing. I have some different rules for centers. but it's the same thing. What are my expectations? When I do movement, what are my expectations? When we go to the instruments, what are my expectations? I make it very clear to them, this is what I'm looking for. Sometimes we call it ready to learn. That's a term I learned from Rick Smith, ready to learn. So show me what ready to learn would look like at the xylophones. Show me what ready to learn would look like when you're sitting in your spot, right? So make sure you set expectations. The next thing is to remind and reteach. Yes, remind, reteach, remind. Did I say that already? Remind them. They're not going to remember. They're not going to remember. That's why when they say silly things, you don't get mad, right? You just go, oh, I'm so sorry. You forgot our rule. What's our rule? That's it. Thank you. I know you'll make a better choice next time. Do it in a positive way, and the kids will respect you because they will understand that you're not here to make them look bad. You're not here to shame them. You're not here to yell at them. For goodness sakes, don't yell at them. Just correct them. They're children. They need correction. They need guidance. We need to, guide them down the way. They're making bad choices. Okay. Doesn't mean they're a bad kid. They're just making bad choices. Now, sometimes those bad choices continue and continue and continue and continue. And you have repeat offenders. They're the ones I call repeat offenders. You know who they are. That one that you knew their name the first time you ever saw them. That's the one. And the one that the classroom teacher can just look out for that kid. Watch for him because just let me know. Sometimes your classroom teachers will be your partners in this. Sometimes they will be like, listen, just let me know. I'm in contact with the parents. Don't worry. Sometimes you have a way to be in contact with the parents. It could be a little slip home. It could be, we have something called talking points at my school district where I can send a message directly to the parents. It actually texts them immediately in their home language. Highly recommend. Ask your district about it. It's called talking points. That's been a lifesaver for us. And for me, particular as a specialist teacher, because otherwise I have to go into the office or go into our learning management system or go into some crazy, I don't know, wherever and search and click and look in and log in. And it's a long process to find somebody's email. And then who knows if they're ever going to find their email. I hardly ever call people anymore. I used to. Back in the old days when people cared about their phones, use their phones as phones. Okay, I'm old. That's it. Okay, I'm off that soapbox. So I just use this talking points and send it home. But sometimes the teachers have the emails really handy. So you can craft an email and send it to the classroom teacher, and then they can forward it on your behalf. That does two things, actually. It lets the teacher know that you are actually following up on that behavior, and it also communicates to the parents. There's more good news about that because sometimes the teachers have seen exactly the same behavior, and here's what the parents do. They go, oh, you just don't like my kid. Well, no, the kid is showing the same behavior all the places that they go. So if the kid's showing the same behavior all the places that they go, guess what? The classroom teacher, you can support them by giving them data, right? They have to document all of these different things, and eventually some kind of a behavior plan can be put in place. But they can't put that plan in place if they don't have data, and you can be a part of helping them have the data. So support your classroom teachers in that way and say, listen, I'm seeing exactly the same behavior here. Let me tell you exactly how that shows up in my room, right? And that can help them. So that hold them accountable. There's usually some kind of a progressive discipline plan at your school. Progressive discipline means that if the first time something happens, you do this. And then the next time something happens, you do this. And then the next time you do this. And then the next time you do this. And eventually it might end up with them in the office, right? Or it might end up with them leaving school if they've been particularly violent, right? Maybe they're throwing a chair in your room. That has happened in schools where I have been. So hopefully it will not get to that point. Our job as a teacher is to try to interrupt the behavior and the dysregulation. We call that dysregulation when they get to that point. We interrupt it. We learn how to interrupt it. And that's a whole nother class. Listen, we could be here for an hour and a half talking about that. Google dysregulation. Look it up. There's lots of different ways to do that. But hopefully holding kids calm and keeping them happy and keeping them moving forward. But there's always going to be a kid that has had a day. We've had them. Kids have them too. They are out of control in their lives sometimes, and the parents of the adults in their lives have done things, and they're like, we have to move tomorrow, and I don't know why. Like, I've been in those schools. Or, well, we just got kicked out of our house, or my dad just got arrested, or, there's all kinds of traumas that are happening in kids' lives, and they bring that to school, and those behaviors sometimes can show up in our classroom. So hopefully you have a school counselor or a classroom teacher who has communicated those things to you so you can handle that child with care. You can even ask the parents, just send out a blanket message that says, if something's going on with your kid that day and you know that you're going to have music class, just send me a message that says handle with care, and I will make sure that kiddo is okay. I saw that on Instagram or someplace recently, and I was like, oh my God, you're the nicest, most loving teacher ever. I'm going to do that. I think that's a great idea. You have to hold kids accountable. If you do not hold kids accountable, they're going to know that your words mean nothing, right? So let's say, for example, let's talk about a little bit calmer behavior, right? A calmer behavior. One calmer behavior is, I asked you not to play your instrument. You bring your instrument to your seat. Like this is the first quarter. When I'm recording, this is the first quarter of our school year, and we are in our first big unit of using instruments. And so we have unpitched percussion instruments in our hands a lot, and I'm reinforcing the expectation that when they get their instrument, they bring it back to their seat and they sit with their hands in their laps, and they do not play it until everyone has their instruments. I let them choose their instruments. I call them up by rug, or call them up by, I have 3 different rugs. I call them up however I call them up. I call them up by the row, or I call them up by their birthday month, or whatever it is, and I have them go choose an instrument, and I give them a list. These are the choices that you can have, because kids like choices. They do. All of us like choices, but this is, I can't use this one. It's not on the board. You cannot use it. Okay. So they get their instruments and they bring them back, and they shake their maraca, or they play on their wood block or whatever, and you remind them once. And you tell them, if I have to remind you once or twice, that's still a good grade. We use a number system grade. That's still a good grade. That's maybe not the best. If you just sit down and you do the thing and I don't have to remind you, that's the top one. But if you sit, and I'm giving them these expectations, and if I have to remind you more than once, that grade goes down to a, yep, that's right. And then if I have to keep reminding you, then that's a this. And if I have to take your instrument away because you refuse to follow the procedures, then that's a 1. And they're like, oh, okay. Very rarely do I have to go to that extent. Every now and then. I had to the other day with one of my second graders, and I took his instrument and I moved it over to my desk, and his instrument was in timeout. This is a way you can handle that. His instrument was in timeout. It didn't know what to do. I tried to take the blame off the kid. And we did a little bit more. And a few minutes later, I gave it back to him. And I said, I want you to make better choices. And he's like, okay. And this is a kid he's very, he's very impulsive. That's what kids are. Sometimes they are. But you have to have a consequence. If you do not have a consequence, then you're going to be dealing with kids playing instruments all the time, all year long. And it's going to drive you crazy. And then eventually you're going to be like, I can't take it anymore. And that's on you. It's on you because you did not hold them accountable. But you can do that. You can start that today. If you have not been doing that, you can be, listen, we're going to start over, and let me be clear about my expectations. I'm going to remind you a few times. And if I have to remind you more than this, then your grade's going to be affected, or you're going to lose your instrument, or whatever the consequence would be. But I know you can make a good choice. So always turn it around to the positive. I know you can make a good choice, because if you can make a good choice with this, you can make a good choice with other things. And I want you to be successful. And way back in the day, Robert Marzano said, the thing that makes the biggest difference in a classroom is that the kids know that the teacher wants them to be successful. That's what makes the biggest difference. So if you can link it to your desire for them to be successful, I know that you're going to be successful as well. Thanks for clicking on that link, and stick around. There's a lot more to come.